Okay, we are recording now. So, hello for anyone that is just tuning in. My name is Kelly, and I am an illustrator and book cover designer. I do a combination of working with DAZ Studio for 3D renders, stock photos, and digital painting to create my covers. And today I'm just gonna play around in DAZ and show some of my authors and some of my designer friends my process for working in DAZ and how I create my models. I'm gonna keep it kind of simple just because I can spend a number of hours tinkering with these, and I try really hard to keep them time efficient, which doesn't always work, but we try. So for those who aren't familiar with DAZ, it is a 3D rendering program. It's free to download. You purchase the assets that you buy, various figures, poses, lighting, props, backgrounds, anything you can think of. Various creators have made and have up for sale. They can range anywhere from a couple dollars up to, $30, $40. But there's some really cool stuff that you can buy, and when working in an industry where stock photos start to get reused an awful lot, and there isn't always a good selection of fantasy or historical poses and outfits, DAZ can be a lifesaver with that. So this is what DAZ looks like when you first open it up. These are all of the various models that I've bought. I have an awful lot of them. You can load one of these and it'll load this model just how you see it without the hair and stuff. It comes pretty out of the box. So I will pull one up. I'll pull up, this is Blaze. I have a lot of assets installed, so initially loading the model can take a second. And by all means, if anyone has questions, if you are in the live stream while I'm working, feel free to ask. There's only a lag of a couple seconds. So this is what the models look like when you pull them into DAZ. Just very basic, zero pose, no expression. You have different up here. You've got a couple different types of views, depending on what you're working on. You've got a wireframe. That's kind of cool looking. Smooth shaded, which I use sometimes when I'm posing just so that the textures and stuff aren't distracting me and I can better see little details like where the fingers are and things like that. Texture shaded is what I mostly work in. It gives you a very rough idea of the colors and textures of everything that you've got going on. And then down here you've got your iRay preview. And if you are a client and you have worked with me and ever gotten a preview of your renders or a mock-up with a render, this is probably what I'm screenshotting to send to you. It's just this super quick. It's still a little bit rough, a little bit grainy, but it's, in most cases, it's fairly close to what you get in the final. To answer Diana's question, have you tried the new filament mode? Filament is a new render agent that DAZ is releasing. It's a lot faster with both rendering and previewing, and which is really exciting because it's being able to render more in real time would be a huge time saver. I can let renders run for 3 or 4 hours, and if I'm trying to render 10 different models for a pre-made render set, that's an awful lot of time. But just like when iRay came out, and everyone was still using the old engine 3 Delight, they then had to go in and start buying all of the textures and things that were compatible with iRay. So I haven't gotten into Filament too much yet, just because they don't have a whole lot out for it, and I have so much iRay stuff. I don't want to dump a ton of money into something just yet, but I am excited to see where they go with it, and I hope I hope it sticks around and it isn't a bust and it ends up being something useful in the long run. So this would be a base character that you bring in, and they all look really nice, but I don't tend to use them straight out of the box like this. Very, very rarely will I just load a model and go with it. So what I normally do is I go in and I load, where is it? I go in and I start with just the very, very basic models. These are free models that come with DAZ, just the Genesis 8 and male and female. There's also Genesis 3, Genesis 2. 8 is the newest. So it tends to, for the most part, be the highest quality. So the basic Gen 8 models, they're very, very generic. Very boring. But this would be the start of my process. I load up one of the basic characters. Before I do anything, I do two things. First, I go into my render settings and I swap out my lighting. This is just the very basic DAZ lighting, and it's fine for working. I would never render like this. So I have my HDR lighting sets. The HDR lighting is, think of your DAZ model in kind of a giant dome. And the HDR lighting is what is on the inside of that dome. It's like your sky lighting, your environmental lighting. It's not like a physical lamp that's shining on your character. So I like using this number 3 here a lot. It's a very, very neutral, easy on the eyes lighting, and I may go in and change it later, but just to start out, this tends to be nice to work with. I also go into my timeline, and this is for purpose of D-Force, which I'll get into a bit later, but to spare myself a headache later, I'm going to move this frame over to frame 15, and again, you'll understand why later, but any posing that I do, I want to be able to animate the character from this 0 pose slowly into the new pose for clothing purposes. So I've got my model. I want to switch them up a bit. There are several different ways I can do this. There is, under your shaping tab, you've got a ton of different morphs, which are different shapes that you can change your characters into. So all of these sliders that you see are different heads and different features for the Genesis male that you can change them into. Like I could go up here and I've got, these weird alien heads that I could do. I could turn him into a big head. I don't know what a space elf is. Oh, I guess that's a space elf. Now you know. It looks kind of like the blue aliens from Avatar. Oh, I actually kind of like that. That's nice. Yeah. Do dwarf. And you can mix these. You don't have to just pick one. You can do a dwarf orc. Only a little less orcish. Maybe add some alien in there. You can get some really weird looking creatures. Make them an orc cat, I guess. I love this fawn one. I've used this before, not at full strength, but to give kind of a slightly animal appearance. My Beastly pre-made that I made a while back, I forget who ended up buying it, but this was one of the morphs that I used on that to give him kind of a slightly more animal look. So you can see there's a ton of different stuff. There's, I can change his neck size. I can change the length. You can really, there's a lot of customization you can do with this. So I could go in here and I could tinker with some of these and just kind of create a head that I like. Kind of hit or miss. Some look better with each other than others. So you can do, there's so much you can do, and you can add as many as you want. Kato is one of my favorites. He just has a really nice face. But if I don't have a specific look I'm going for, and I'm just kind of wanting to just make something, then I have this cool utility called Character Mixer, and I can load it up. It can take a second. This is what it looks like, and it pulls up all of the various, these are all the various creators, and the different morphs that they've, that they have. I'm gonna work on, I'll include head and body morphs. No, we'll just do the head. I have my presets set up to some of my favorites, and excluding like the alien ones and stuff, because when I'm trying to do a regular human character, I don't want a random alien morph in there. You can choose how many morphs you want to include. I usually have it up to like 9 or 10. And then you can just come down here and hit this randomize button. Give it a second, and it will take all of those morphs that you selected and create something out of it by random. So sometimes you get some really weird ones depending on what it picks, but like that one's pretty nice. But you can also get some really good ones, and it's a lot faster than just tinkering with the sliders. I'm not digging that one. That one's really subtle, but I kind of like that. I kind of like this one. I think we'll stick with this one. I don't usually use it for the body just because the body tends to be a lot easier to create. So I think we'll go with this face. And you can see over here on the right, these are the different sliders that it enabled. I can actually go up to currently used, and it used all of these, and at varying percents. And I can go in here and I can tweak these if I want. Michael Aid is kind of the Henry Cavill looking model of DAZ. So that's kind of nice. So we'll go with this, just for the sake of not messing with it for 3 hours. So from here, I'll usually, before I move on to the body, and before I kind of finalize this head, this is the default skin that comes with the Genesis 8 model, and I don't really want to use that. I need to go in here and save this. I don't care for the base skin. It's not terrible, but it's not great. So I would go into here and look through some of my other characters that I've got for some good skins. And different creators are better at making skins than others. Fior has really nice skin. All of Muso's models have really nice skin. Kjaer has really nice skin. I know I'm mispronouncing that. Max has one of my favorite skins. So does Nyx. There's a ton of different models that you can choose from, and I think I'm gonna go with, let's go back up, oops. You can see that's really red. Okay. So, tweaking the translucency of his skin helps a bit. These are all different settings that, you know, you mess with to tweak. Skin, you know, skin is, in real life, skin has a little bit of translucency to it that gives it a little bit of its color. So you don't want a skin that's just a flat color. This skin is really nice. You can see close up. I'm not sure if it shows up on your screens, but you can see some of the veins, like in his shoulder, some of the wrinkles he's got. Obviously, he's got some freckles, which are really nice. But especially like those veins and stuff really add to the realism if you're aiming for realistic. And this particular model even comes with those veins. He comes with, they're called maps, and it kind of shapes the skin a little bit. And you can turn some of those veins on or off if you don't want them. So I'm going to keep them because they look nice. You can see he's got a bunch of different eyebrow colors. He's got chest hair, leg hair, eyebrows, arm hair. We will come back to that because I want to do his body shaping real fast. Down here into body. And by now I just kind of know which bodies I really like. If I'm going for a muscular look, or if I'm going for, you know, scrawny teenager look, or athletic, heavier set, whatever. Holt's got a pretty nice body and realistic. A lot of times the arms look super skinny on some of these models, so. I love that he's got freckles all across his back. And sometimes once I have the skin loaded, I'm kind of like, I don't really like the face anymore, but I'm gonna leave it for now. So, super base character. We can go further in depth with him. One of my big things is eyes. DAZ eyes on the models can look really kind of dead and flat, and I don't like that. So I always go in and I've got this little surface selector tool, and I'll select the surface of these eyes and go in to all of the eyes I have. And again, I know which ones by now look the most realistic, and sometimes realism doesn't matter. Sometimes I know I'm going to be going for a really painted look when I'm doing the cover, so realism isn't as important. Like, those are very pretty, but they're not, you know, not really realistic. But even these, I can do some work on to improve them a bit. How have you been doing it, Diana? She says that's how you replace the eyes. I've been doing it wrong. You can also go in through the smart content and go into the figures, you know, and select the eyes that way. That's just easier for me. Yeah, so you can do that too. I'll do that sometimes. Max has really nice eyes, so sometimes I'll just go into his figure in the smart content and select them. But going in through surfaces lets you look through all of the eye materials that you have all at once, so you don't have to stick with that figure. So then I go back into my parameters tab, and the eyes right now look super flat and very kind of dead. So naturally the cornea on a human eye bulges a bit. One of the head morphs I put on here already bumped it up, but I'm gonna bump it all the way up to 100. And then I'm gonna go into the iris, and one of my assets that I have is called natural eyes. Super handy, and I just bump that up. I've also noticed that DAZ tends to make the eyes really big, like bigger than they really ought to be, so I make them about 25% smaller. Probably tone this down a bit. And that's already a little bit of an improvement. Not a ton, but a bit. So then I will go back into my surfaces tab, and again, I've got these an asset that gives me a little bit more control. This Natural Eyes for Genesis has a lot of really nice extra features for eyes that I use on every single render. It's got some really realistic eye colors in there too. So I always come in and turn this moisture to off. I don't like how it looks when it's on. If necessary, I go in here and tweak the reflections. Here's some of the max reflections. They look really nice. You can come in here and change the sclera if you need to. You can see all these different colors that I have in here for like horror kind of looks, bloodshot. In settings, there's kind of this cool pupil shine. I will often come in here and turn on one of these shadowings. Oh, that didn't like that. This one. No. Oh, okay. It doesn't like... If I change the color, it'll probably... Go in and use Max's eyes. There we go. Max also has this nice moisture apply that I use on a lot of my models too. It just adds this, once the preview loads a little better, you can see along the base of his eye, like his, along where like his tear ducts would be, There's a little bit of a shine there now, and it adds just kind of a nice little touch to it. And finally, this is kind of a weird step that I saw someone suggest, and I found that I really liked it, so I use it. I go into my shaders and find this water thin shader, and I apply that over the top. And it gives it just this really nice kind of wet, glossy look to it that I really like. Much more realistic. And again, if you're gonna be rendering from, you know, far off or whatever, these are details that really don't matter. You can't see them anyway, but I think they look nice. And depending on the character, we could go in and add makeup or, you know, tribal markings, tattoos, all kinds of stuff that we could add to him. I guess we'll test this. I haven't used this yet. I just bought it. So, and it's made for a much older version. So I don't know if it'll work, but let's try it. Let's give him a scar on his face. You know, that's not terrible. That's actually not bad, especially for a really old product. So yeah, we'll let him have a little scar on his face. He's got an owie. Alright, so I have my base model. I've got his skin set up. I've got his face. At this point, I would figure out what kind of posing I want him to have. If he's going to be fighting, obviously he's going to need some sort of a combat pose, or if he's a wizard, he's going to be spell casting. So let's go into poses. I guess I don't get to use these often, so let's make him a superhero. Sure. Why not? This might be the point where I come in, and not all poses come with expressions. This one doesn't. If it has one, it's not very exciting. So I'll come in here and tweak things. One of the things that I pay attention to is that faces are not symmetrical in real life. Like, there's nothing in a posing or the shaping of faces that is the same from the right to the left. There's some sort of small differences, and when you're looking at something that's meant to be realistic and it's perfectly symmetrical, that's part of what kind of triggers your brain into knowing that something is off with it. So I always come in here and just in any of these ones that have left and right options, I adjust them just a tiny bit. So his eyes, I might want them squinting, but I'll set them at different percentages so that one's squinting a little more than the other. I'm doing all of this pretty quick because I just know where my various settings are. Again, it's all very tiny changes. Like, it doesn't have to be anything hugely dramatic. So that looks pretty good. Again, I'm doing this super quick. I'll often mess with these for quite a while trying to get it to look how I want it to look. I also have some cool assets that add in some wrinkles and some slightly more realistic bends when the limbs are bent. And I have this vascularity controller that brings in some veins and stuff. They aren't too noticeable until you actually render, but again, helps with that realism. And I could go in and I could mess with anything from the color of his nails to, the underlying tint of his skin. I could give him blue skin, green skin. I could change his nipples. I could make his toes longer. Like, it's pretty cool, all the various things that you can go in and do. Like, I could even, if I went into his hands, I could come give him some claws. And maybe make his fingers longer. Kind of unnatural, creepy looking. I'll give him some pointed ears. Yeah. He's looking pretty cool. Very naked, but cool. I'm going to go ahead and set up my camera too, just because I like this angle I've got him framed in. So I'm going to tell my camera to keep this angle. And that way I can zoom back in and work on him as I want to. And then at any time I can come up here to my view and switch back to this camera, and it'll take me right back to that shot that I like, so I can see how he's looking. So now that we've got our figure, we can put some clothes on him so he's not running around naked. I mean, if he wants to, that's on him. I'm gonna pick something kind of simple. Let's just go. I was saying before the stream started that often when I'm doing outfits, I won't just choose a full outfit to load. I'll go in and choose a shirt from one set and pants from another, shoes from another, and kind of mix and match so that it's not all just, you know, one outfit. In this case, I'm not gonna make you guys sit through that long process because it can take a while. So I'm just gonna come up here and I want his shirt open, so we'll load this here. And you'll see this term on a lot of outfits, this D-force. And D-force is some of the newer outfits are rendered or are created with weight maps that tell the program how heavy they are and the amount of friction that they have against other surfaces and all these other little details that are built into the fabric so that you can run it through a simulation where the fabric will drape naturally based off of those settings. It's kind of a very finicky process, and a lot of times it only works as well as the person who made it created it. So they may have put D-force in it, but may not have done it very well. So it's kind of hit or miss. I have some stuff that runs through D-force like a dream, and other stuff that I just fight with trying to make it look right. So I'm going to go back into my texture shading. Another thing about D-force that took me a long time to realize is you don't want to render, or you don't want to run everything through a simulation at once. So I tend to come in here, and anything that isn't required in the simulation, I immediately take out. So actually going to get rid of that for a second. So like right now, I just want his pants to simulate. And I am going to go in here to edit these pants. And I want to make sure, okay, so this looks like maybe they've done all their settings right, and it may run okay. So I'm going to go into my simulation settings. I'm going to turn this start bones from memorize posed off, and I'm going to tell it to use my timeline play range. And this is what I did at the very beginning that I said would come into play better later, where I set this to frame 15, because if I go back to frame 0, he's still in his 0 pose. So as we move through this, he's gonna get into his position, and it just helps the fabric drape better. So I also find it works a little better if I go into smooth shaded. It just tends to run better. And I always save before running D-force because it likes to crash and it likes to have weird explosions and do all sorts of weird things. So I've lost way too many renders by not saving before I run it. once it hits this 15 mark where my pose was, everything past that, I have it set at 30 frames. From 15 to 30, basically it's just giving it a chance to kind of settle, let gravity do its work. So now if I go back into my iRay preview, those pants are laying a lot better. You'll see I've got some weird little areas that it's called poke through, where very, very common with pretty much every outfit ever. That just kind of is where it's not colliding with the skin quite right. There's various ways you can fix it. I usually start by coming into the smoothing and upping some of the collision iterations and the smoothing, and that usually will take care of the worst of the issues. Yeah. So then I've just got this little one over here, which honestly I'll probably just leave it and deal with it with the patch tool in Photoshop because it takes 2 seconds. Let me see if I have some outfits come with other colors and materials for them. This one doesn't seem to. Those pants are so obnoxiously bright. So I'm gonna go into fabric and just see. Which you can lose the details sometimes, which sucks. So it just kind of depends on how something was made, how you want it to look. So we'll just leave it as is right now. So then I'm going to go into these pants, and when I load up my shirt, I want to make sure that these pants aren't interfering. So I'm going to go back into my simulation settings, and I'm going to tell it to freeze, which means that those are not going to move now if I run D-Force. Let's go back into shaded. I'll load his shirt back up. Okay, so he looks like he's set up. So I'm just going to go in here and tell him to simulate. The shirt has a lot more movement to it, a lot more, that has to take into consideration, so it takes a little bit longer. And some outfits can take a solid 4 or 5 minutes depending on how complex they are. That was why I picked this outfit, because I figured it would be a bit quicker and easier. There we go. There is our Hawaiian werewolf dude. He's looking pretty good. You can see how all of that just drapes naturally now and isn't just kind of stiff and awkward. Again, there's a ton of different settings that I could tweak if I wanted it to drape a little bit differently. If I wanted it to be a heavier fabric, if I wanted it to be blowing in the wind, I could set up a wind node to have it coming from a certain direction at a certain strength. I have kind of limited luck with that. Sometimes it works great, sometimes it makes everything crash. So now that we've got that done, let's go in to give him some hair. And going for kind of a modern look. This is actually kind of cool. Maybe we'll do this. So this is a buzz cut, but it's got these cool scars on it. So I want to give them a try and see how it looks. And it's taking a minute. I've used this once before, and those scars just make it lag. There we go. And I'm going to save it before it decides to crash on me. DAZ is a great program, but it is super finicky, and I don't have as many crashes as I used to on my old system, but it's still a pain in the butt. And I can go in here, and they've got different colors for his hair. I could make him whatever colors I want. I was looking for these. They've got these kind of materials to change these scars into, so the healed scars, or these, I like these opened wounds a little bit better. So I'm going to use those, and it's probably going to take a second because it's a layer, and layers load very slow in DAZ. This is why I haven't used these more. There we go. Do I use other 3D programs besides DAZ? I tinkered a little bit with Blender and immediately got a headache and have not touched it since. I haven't really messed with Poser. I think Bryce is kind of outdated these days. I don't know if anyone even uses it anymore. I really want to get into ZBrush to start making my own assets, but it's pretty pricey, so I haven't. And plus, it's just one more program to learn, so I really want to. I just haven't gotten there yet. So DAZ is it for me. So that looks pretty good. I could even put other hair on top of it if I wanted to. Like if I wanted to come up here to this. Where is it? Why not? Yeah, I wouldn't mind learning Blender. It would probably come in really handy. I just haven't. Like, DAZ already has such a huge learning curve that I haven't had the energy to try putting that kind of time into something else. But ZBrush would be a lot of fun just because I could make more custom things as needed. So what I did with this was I added on this braid. I specifically looked for a hair set that had a shaved side because I wanted to be able to go in and select that shaved area and turn off the opacity. So that the scars and the other hair that I put on still showed through. I didn't want them to get covered, but then still gave him some hair up on the top. And I could go in here to this braid and move it around. It's really easy to make it look not natural, so you gotta kind of move slow with it. Looks pretty good. I also go into my hair and into my settings, and this happens to only come into a base resolution, which doesn't let me do any kind of smoothing or anything on it. So I usually go in here and convert this to sub D, which allows it to be a higher resolution when it renders, which won't make it as good a quality as it would be if it were created as high resolution, but still kind of helps. We've got some kind of poke through on his head up there that that's just a tiny bit, so I'll probably fix that in post. And then I can go in here and I can add a smoothing modifier. Which will, especially for older hair assets that look really kind of blocky and pixelated when you render them, they've got kind of a jagged edge. Upping the smooth modifier can really help get rid of those, you know, jagged edges. The difference isn't really noticeable in here, but will be when rendering. So there's our dude. His hair looks so dumb, but we're gonna keep it. And at this point, this is where I would go in and start messing with lighting. I'm also going to, I don't want that ground shadow, because, you know, when I render this, chances are it's going to go onto a background. Oh, sorry, I'm yawning. I'm talking so much. Again, when I'm doing pre-made renders, I would probably just leave the lighting like this because it's super basic, and gives the artists that are buying it more control over when they're trying to shade it. But if I'm doing it for a custom or a pre-made of my own, I would probably go in and load this boss lighting set. And they've got a couple different scripts. Let's do something dramatic. Not terribly noticeable yet. If I come down here and I select these boss render settings, it's going to take that environmental light that I told you guys about earlier, that dome light, and it's going to turn it off. So instead, it's going to rely entirely on these scene lights, all of these different lights that are set up with that script I just ran. And I could go in here and adjust these and all that. The boss lighting set even has this cool little red triangle thing that shows you what it recommends as the best camera angle. I don't always use it because sometimes I want my lighting to come from different angles. Like, I actually kind of liked it. I want the light shining on his face. That looks pretty good. And I can come click on that little eye icon and get rid of that. But I like that lighting. It also makes his pants and his shirt not look so obnoxiously bright. So I think that looks pretty good. I could even come in here to his hair. I could change his hair color. I actually have a set of shaders, these backlight shaders that I really enjoy, that are just super high quality. All of these Alchemy ones are. And these backlight ones especially give a kind of nice effect when there's light coming from behind. Kind of makes the edges of the hair a little bit more transparent, like they would be in real life. So I think he looks pretty cool. I mean, if I were actually going to render him, if I actually decide to do something with him, I will change his clothes, because the luau look isn't really doing it for me. And I would probably swap out that hair, because it's kind of a Viking hair thing, and it's, you know, probably not terribly appealing in a contemporary outfit. But, I mean, I may turn this into something else that I use for a pre-made or something. And I would go in, and there's a little part here where his shirt's cutting through part of his pants. That little poke through over here. Those are all things that I would kind of go in and fix at the very end of my render, right before I render. If it's faster to do it in DAZ than it is to fight with it in post-work. And as far as my render settings go, for anyone interested, Diana might be interested, I tend to work really big, bigger than I think I need to. This auto headlamp, I always turn it to off. There's never been an instance where I have ever needed that. It just is extremely blaring, it washes things out, it looks terrible. Pixel size, again, I work super big. If it's going to be something I have to zoom into, I'll max out at 10,000 by 10,000. Usually 6,000 by 6,000 is good enough for what I need. My progressive rendering, if I'm doing the really simple HDR lighting like I did have, my max time, I can usually set that to around 1500, and that's plenty. Because he's got this boss lighting, the more of this scene lighting that you have, the longer it's going to take to render and get it so that it's not noisy and pixelated with a bunch of little artifacts everywhere. So I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave this max time at 7200 just for now. I haven't quite played with it enough to see what that time should be, like I have with my pre-made renders. But I am going to change this rendering quality to 3, and I'm going to change this rendering converged ratio to 99, and that's going to make a really big difference, at least in my opinion, of how it's going to turn out when it's done. Environment, again, I want that ground set to off. There might be times that I'll leave it on. Environmental lighting resolution, I'll usually turn that up. Everything else I just kind of leave. If it's a render that I'm wanting to watch, I'll have it render in a new window. But for the most part, I tend to set up all of my renders and then I throw them in this render queue that I have. You guys, my clients have probably heard me say that I'm going to toss it in the queue overnight. So I'll toss it into my render queue up here. Like, these are all of the pre-made renders I was working on for the kick-ass render stock that you can see they're all done. But I'll add it to my queue, like add current scene, and I'll tell it just the single view, which is whatever view I currently have up. And then I will save it. And then before I go to bed at night, I will come back into this queue and tell it to start. And it'll go through every single one of those renders that I've added and just knock them out while I sleep so that they're ready to go when I wake up. Because again, these can take, a small prop could take me 5 minutes, but something like this is probably going to run for 2 or 3 hours before it's done. Possibly even longer, especially if I've got any kind of backgrounds, a lot of really extreme lighting, multiple characters, anything that, the more stuff there is in the scene, obviously, and the more lighting, the longer it's going to have to render to look good when it's done. And I've had full scenes that have taken 9 or 10 hours to render, which is why I try to do it in pieces, because if I render something for 9 or 10 hours and then I load it into Photoshop and there's a mistake that I can't fix in Photoshop, that's then an awful lot of work that I have to go back in and redo, and I don't like it. So there you have it. Again, there's a ton more details I could do. I could go into there. I'll go in and mess with bump maps on the skin. If I'm doing a close-up, I might want more texture on the skin, especially with the more feminine guys that I like to do, or with some of the female models. I go in and I do makeup and eyeliner and mess with eyelashes and skin gloss. I'll make the skin look a little bit glossier for a more fantasy kind of look. All sorts of little things like that. There's way more that goes into it that's me nitpicking and playing with details, but this is kind of the bare minimum that I would do for a render is, you know, setting up a new face, new body, skin, hair, pose, any kind of special markings, clothes, deforce, render settings. So, yeah, I think that about covers it. If anyone has questions on something in specific that they want me to cover in a video in the future, I'm happy to do so. Or if we just want to do this again with another model, or even my post work once this is done rendering, I am happy to do that. And thank you for those of you that were here and had questions and wanted to hang out and watch my 1.5-hour video. I hope it wasn't boring. So I'm going to call it done for now. And thank you again. I hope everyone is having a really great new year. And I will get this posted as soon as the stream is done. Thank you, Diana. Thank you for your questions. And I'm always happy to answer any more over Messenger if you have them. I will talk to you guys later.